Thank you. Of course, I appreciate you standing before I talk. I never know, how it's going to go after I do. But you know what? God has a way of preparing us for what's ahead of us. He really does. I know when I ran for judge, I felt like it was a calling. I've had reporters say, "You felt it was a calling? Did you hear voices?" I wish I heard voices. I wish I heard voices. Life would be so much easier. When I was in the Army at Fort Benning, there was a guy that did hear voices, and they told him what to do. I've never been that fortunate. So I pray, I read the Bible, I seek wise counsel. It'd be a lot easier if I heard voices. But my wife and I felt like this was the calling at that point in time, running for judge. And we had a backlog of 1,000 criminal cases out on bond awaiting trial. I had to get them set for trial. And the way you do that, you have a big cattle call. I'd call the case. The defendant and his attorney would come up, and I would look them in the eye, and I would tell them when their trial date was, ask them if they understand it. That way, if they weren't there, I revoked their bond. They'd get arrested, go to jail, and they got to trial. They got ready for trial a lot quicker, it seemed like, when they were in jail. They wanted trial quicker, it seemed like. But anyway, I was calling one after another, called a case. The defendant and his attorney came up, and I got a court reporter taking it down, recording taking it, and I said, "Are you the defendant?" Called his name. And before he could answer, his lawyer said, "Judge, my client is deaf, so we're going to need an interpreter for the trial." And I said, "That's have an interpreter for the trial. We'll have an interpreter for every other hearing. But today, all I need to do is make sure he understands when his trial date is." So I looked the defendant in the eye and I said, "Can you read my lips?" And he looked me in the eye and went, well, I didn't realize it at the time, but that was good preparation for Washington. Like you can be questioning the Attorney General of the United States and have him look you in the eye and not be honest with you. I didn't know what kind of preparation that would be. But fortunately, I've now been considered BFF with the Attorney General. He called me his buddy, right? I understand he said it, "You don't want to go there, buddy." But I took it as a term of endearment. He wanted to be my buddy. I was deeply touched. But anyway, there are a lot of problems going on these days, and I know God has a sense of humor, but I know that he has a sense of justice. And like Lincoln said, and the words are inscribed on the inside of the north wall of the Lincoln Memorial, that second inaugural address, where really it's one of the great theological debates he's having with himself about how a good God could allow such suffering to occur. And in essence, he finally gets to the point that he says, but basically, if it's God's will that every drop of blood drawn by the master's lash be drawn by the sword, then we must say, as was said 3,000 years ago, and he quotes from the Bible itself as saying, "The judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether." Folks, God is merciful. He is full of grace. He's given us chance after chance. He has blessed America and made us more free, with more abundance, more assets than any nation in history, more than Solomon's Israel. But to whom much is given, of him much is required. And today, as I stand before you, there are more Christians being persecuted than any time in the history of the world. We have been given much, of us much is required. We should be about encouraging good conduct, and we should be about punishing evil. And when we fail to stand up and be a light and a beacon for good conduct, nobody else is going to do it. I was in Nigeria 2 weeks ago, and I was visiting with 22 of the mothers who had daughters kidnapped. And it's a horrible situation. And what some of the other Nigerians and one of the pastors was saying is, you know, America used to stand up for right, and we keep being told nobody in America cares, nobody will ever come, so we're so thrilled you came, but it doesn't look like America cares anymore. When I traveled in the Middle East in the past year, our allies, moderate Muslims, are saying, you're helping the enemy now. Well, why are you helping the enemy? You know, you're throwing away your friends and helping your enemies. We don't understand it. There are consequences for that kind of bad judgment. And to read last night, after I got back from the Capitol, that our Secretary of State is trying to work with the Iranians on the Iraq situation. Folks, Iran, in case you hadn't followed, wants to destroy the little Satan Israel, and they want to destroy the United States, the great Satan, the United States. They want us gone. Iraq has radical Islamists coming in and destroying the good that was done with the American treasure, and especially the treasure of human lives. And because of the bungling of this administration, failing to get a status of forces agreement that President Bush basically had teed up, it should have been an easy thing to do. Now, as the country is falling, the president's going to send less than 300 troops over, but without a status of forces agreement, Iraq can arrest them anytime they don't like what they're doing. That's what a status of forces agreement protects. This is really getting serious. And since we know Iran is very serious about wanting to destroy the United States, if you had someone step forward and say, I want to work with the Iranians, I want to share military information with the Iranians, then some might say that would be treason for any American to go try to work with the Iranians because they want to destroy us. But treason requires an intent. And I don't believe there is any intent here. I think it's just sheer ignorance, thinking that you are so progressive you can get our enemies to love you. And I remember under this administration when we voted against Israel for one of the first times in Israel's modern history, and it was to require Israel to disclose their weapons. And I thought about the time Isaiah went to Hezekiah by direction and said, what have you done? He knew what he had done. But Hezekiah, if you get to the original Hebrew, he explains, oh, the Babylonians came in and I showed them all our treasure. And this isn't in King James, but the literal Hebrew, I showed them all our defenses we have in our arsenal. You don't show your enemy all of your defenses, and this administration is doing great damage in working with our enemies who have never given up the desire to destroy us. I have Christian friends who say, Louie, we don't have to worry. God's in control. Yes, he's in control, just like he was when the children of Israel said, we would like a king. And God said, it's not a good idea. Let me just warn you, it's not a good idea. They wanted a king. They got a king. It wasn't a good idea. He was in control when Israel split into the northern and southern kingdom. He was in control when the northern kingdom fell to the Assyrians. He was in control when Jerusalem, the southern kingdom, fell to the Babylonians, because he gives us free choice. And he has given us enough freedom, more than any nation in history, and now it's up to us to protect it. In the Declaration of Independence, all of the founders agreed that we were endowed, not by government, but by our Creator, capital C, with certain inalienable rights. Well, one might ask, well, if they're inalienable, why doesn't everybody have them? Because they're a bequest. And like any bequest, you don't get it unless you accept it, and you don't keep it unless you're willing to fight for it. Because there are always evil people in this life who will take it away. Folks, I want to leave you with one final thought. We can be such a great instrument for good in the world, and it makes us more blessed, and we become more blessed. But when we do not enforce the law, when we break all the proverbs that talk about impartiality and fairness, and say some can ignore the law and some can't, we're headed for trouble. But what can you do? Just want to leave you with this final thought. I had to try a murder case, and because it was so well known in my hometown of Tyler, we moved it to Dallas, and somebody in my Sunday school class, a couple, had a son, Michael, who had was found to have a tumor while I was in trial in Dallas. It was a long 10-week murder trial. And I got word that Dennis and Leanne's son, Michael, had this tumor. It was very, very serious. People didn't normally recover. I went by to see them, and something just hit me that night. I need to go get some tapes on heaven. I just have a feeling I need to do that. Well, I called around the next morning before court, and the closest place was way out of Mesquite. I didn't think I'd have time during lunch, and I nearly didn't go. I finally went, got the tapes, got a player, took them to Michael. Well, he got better, and months later he was doing great. But then months after that, the tumor came back with a vengeance. Took him. At his funeral, Dennis came up to me, and we hugged and we wept. And Dennis said, "Louie, that last night in the hotel, we were supposed to have treatment the next day. At 2 o'clock, Michael woke up and said, 'Daddy, can I listen to the tape on heaven?' And he said while he was listening to the tape on heaven, he went there. And I cringed. I came that close not to doing what I had the feeling and knew I should do. Folks, you get those feelings and test it. If it's not something selfish, if it's for some greater good, for someone else, for the country, then do it. Because when the Spirit moves, you better move or we're going to lose the country. God bless you all.